Back when I was in high school, I had trouble making friends. My grades weren't that bad, but I guess I was just coasting along. I had friends, but just as soon as I made them, I seemed to lose them. That's just the way life goes sometimes, you know? I always ended up alone. One day after school, I was hanging out in a park. I was sat on the swings in the playground. I won't go into it, but I was never in a rush to get home. Home life wasn't great. Suddenly, a beautiful woman approached me and said, "What are you doing?" She said it politely, as one would if one wanted to stir up some chit-chat. I just said, "Oh, just having a little breather, I guess." She paused and then asked, "Is something troubling you?" She asked many questions about how I was feeling. I can't really remember what she said. My memories are a little hazy regarding that conversation. But I will say that speaking to her that afternoon in the playground really lifted my spirits. I had a specific time I had to be home by, so I said to her that I better get going. She replied, "Oh really? Will you come back here soon?" I liked the quiet park, and she seemed nice, so I said, "Yeah, I think I'll probably come back here again." With that said, I was on my way home. I headed to the park the next day after school, and the woman was there, and we started talking again. It was nice. I was able to make a friend outside of school, since life at school continued in the same way, coasting along without any friends, and not doing either good or bad with my studies. I spoke about many things with the woman in the park. She was particularly interested in anything that was causing me to worry. But we also talked about other things like favorite foods. It was fun. But one day I went to the park as usual and I didn't see her there. I guess that was because it was winter, and it was a little too cold to be sat in the playground on the swings. I remember realizing this as the snow was falling and settling on the ground. I was thinking to myself, oh yeah, that's why she's not here. She didn't come for days on end. I could understand not coming when it was snowing, but when the weather improved, I still didn't see her. I wondered if she moved away. I was really sad I couldn't find my friend. I was rushing around the neighboring area looking for her, and an old lady must have spotted me, acting a little strange. She called out to me, "What are you doing running around here?" Because she asked me, I answered, and I said that I was looking for my friend that I hadn't seen in a while. "Ah, is your friend a beautiful young woman?" she asked. I said yes. My face must have lit up. I was genuinely excited about the thought of seeing her again. But the old lady's face dropped a little, and a look of concern passed over it. "I know that young woman you're looking for. She used to live in the house on the corner there." Used to? My heart sank a little. I wanted to know what happened, so I asked. She looked around, appearing to check if the coast was clear. "She attempted murder. She's not here anymore. She was taken away by her family to live with them in the countryside." She said it so quietly that it was almost a whisper. I couldn't believe it. She went on to describe the scenario. The young woman was at an event like a barbecue or something, and she was talking to a young boy about my age, who was her cousin. She grabbed him by the neck and started choking him in front of her relatives. When they asked her why she did it, she said something chilling. She told her family members the reason she did it was because she had been speaking to a high school-aged kid in the park, me. And whenever she saw him, me, she thought he was so cute that she couldn't resist grabbing him and squeezing him. It sounded like she could be pretty sadistic. They were confused and very worried, and they deemed her to be a danger, and to prevent her from doing something like that again, they sent her away. I'm not sure how that works. It doesn't solve the problem, it only moves the problem. To me, she was nothing but a beautiful, gentle person who I believed cared about me a great deal. I felt an alien sense of fear when I learned what she was capable of. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part of this experience for me is the fact that I thought I had made a friend that would last a long time. And now she was gone, and I had to go back to being alone.
This happened not too long ago on my regular walk to work. There's a park not too far from my place, and every morning, without fail, there's a woman who sits on a bench in the park. The bench faces away from the path I use to walk to work. She sits there, rain or shine. When it rains, she doesn't use an umbrella or wear a raincoat. Even when the weather is terrible, she just sits there, not moving. I have never seen her face, but I get the sense that she's relatively young. Her clothing looks pretty expensive. She never seems to mind the heavy rain. I haven't ever seen anyone approach or speak to her, but I guess that's because there aren't many people around when I pass by. When I see her, it's usually very early in the morning. She's always gone when I am heading home from work. I noticed her first in the early stages of fall, and I expected to see less of her when the mornings got colder and the wind carried a chill. But even in the winter, she's there every morning, sitting on that park bench. Although the seasons change, her clothing doesn't. I was curious, but I kept my distance. However, one morning, I saw a businessman take a sideways glance at the woman on the bench. I watched as a gust of wind blew his scarf from his neck over towards the bench where the woman was sitting. I could sense that he wanted to grab his scarf and get away as soon as possible. But as he got a little closer to the woman, he looked up at her, and then he just ran. Enough was enough. I had to go over to take a look for myself. I had no idea if this woman was okay or not. I approached with trepidation, and when I came around the bench to face her, I was completely shocked. This woman had no face. Her face had been gouged out with some sort of knife, and all that was left was a gaping black hole. I started screaming, yet somehow I was unable to look away, and it was only when I took a second closer look did I realize something. I was looking at a mannequin. It wasn't the sight of some unimaginable slaughter, but the lifeless body of a mannequin. I couldn't believe how dumb I had been. Of course, a person wouldn't sit perfectly still on the coldest of winter mornings or in the pouring rain, wearing as little as that mannequin did. There I stood, looking at the mannequin on the park bench with the gouged out face, confused and creeped out. I had to get away from that thing. It was terrifying. As I jogged away towards the exit of the park, I took a look back at the bench. The mannequin seemed so lifelike. I swear it looked like it could move at any moment. It was really weird. Who would do such a thing? The next morning, I left for work as usual. I had to go through that park. I wasn't scared, though curiosity was the overriding emotion. I wanted to see if that mannequin would still be on the bench, but it wasn't. It was almost as if someone wanted us to find it. Someone was getting up early and putting that mannequin out there on the bench with what I could only assume was the intention to show it to people. I have been wondering for years now, what was the purpose or the intention of the mannequin owner's actions? Is there some sort of deeper meaning behind it that I'm just not getting? Or does it mean nothing? Was it supposed to be some chilling warning to whoever found it? Or was it some sort of reenactment of some horrific real-life incident? I don't know, but I think about it often. I never saw that mannequin again, but every time I go through a park and I see someone sitting very still, my mind wanders. There are parks and benches everywhere.
I grew up in a rural area, but in recent years developments are being made. We even have a shopping mall now. There is still a lot of undeveloped land, so at the time being we have an unusual mix of rural and urban areas. People like me who grew up here probably don't notice that this area appears a little different to others, because they have witnessed the gradual changes. But if you were a visitor, you'd probably take a look around and say something like, "Why does it look so different on this side of the road compared to that side of the road?" I often wonder myself. There is one place in our town that will seemingly never be developed. I've always wondered why. I think that's what the locals wonder as well. It's just a deserted park which can be found south of the newly developed lots. All the equipment in the playground is old and rusty. I've seen kids play in there in the past, but since a new park was made nearby, and that park's well maintained, there seems to be little to no interest in the old park. This desolate old park isn't needed anymore. It doesn't fit in with the new, more modern surroundings. I don't get why they don't tear it down and build something like a convenience store in its place. It doesn't take an expert in town planning to realize that this land could be made better use of. No one in the neighborhood is using it or has any need for it, and that's been my opinion for a few years now. So I always thought that there was something strange about it. Anyways, I had a friend come and visit my hometown from university. He had just moved into the neighboring town and wanted to hang out. Almost instantly he said, "What's up with that park?" I explained that it's just always been there, and he just started running over to the park to take a closer look, presumably. I followed on behind and we went through the rusted gate into the playground. This was the first time I had ever been in the playground. It looked a bit better than I thought it did from the outside. Still, it wasn't particularly inviting. It just wasn't user-friendly. I kind of understood why it was still here. It felt like stepping back in time because it had this old-fashioned vintage kind of feel to it. My friend just started playing on all the stuff in the playground. I couldn't help but laugh. It was weird to see a grown man run around like a child. He got on the swing and I pushed him a bit. We must have looked pretty weird. Suddenly the swing broke and my friend hit the deck. I don't know whether it was because the swings were intended for the use of children and not adults, or if it was due to the age of them. My friend got up, and he was laughing. He seemed fine, and he just ran towards the exit of the playground. I tried to see if there was anything I could do to repair the swing. I doubted that there would be, but I thought it would be worth taking a look. The air quickly turned cold. There was a chill to it, despite it being midsummer. I felt a very strange sensation. My ears started to ring. Seeing that there was nothing to be done to fix the swing, I decided to get out of the park too. Just before I rose to my feet, I felt a sharp tug on my left arm, like someone had pulled it to get my attention. I turned around expecting to see my friend, but there was no one there. Could I have just gotten my clothes caught on something? I doubt it. Later that night I took a bath, and while I was washing, I noticed that there was something on my left arm. It looked like light bruising. I wondered if I had some kind of sunburn or maybe I bumped into something. I don't remember doing that though, and the day was kind of overcast. I didn't care that much. I was sure it would disappear soon. I was wrong. Over the coming days and weeks, the bruise deepened in color. I felt so self-conscious about it that I took to wearing long-sleeve shirts. I started to worry. I never had a bruise like that before. A week and a bit went by, and then I got a call from my friend, and I mentioned what was going on with the bruise on my arm. To my surprise, he said he had a similar bruise. We met up again and I checked out his bruise. His was leading up towards his shoulder. He said that he had had an accident while riding his bike, and he had been in the hospital. Prior to his accident, he said that his left shoulder had started to feel really heavy. We were both weirded out by these goings-on, We sat there trying to search for some kind of commonality, and we both agreed that we didn't have these marks on our bodies before we went into the playground in the park. We both headed back home, and when I got back to mine, I decided to call my dad. He grew up in this area, and I wanted to ask him about that playground. He said that he remembered an incident where a kid got fatally injured when he came off the swing. I had a feeling that there was something in that park that caused this. I got in touch with my friend and I asked him to come back to the park with me. I didn't know what to do, really, but something told me that we had to go back there and try and make things right. We decided we needed time to figure out our options, but we made a promise to meet at the park in 2 weeks' time. During those 2 weeks, the scar on my arm eventually began to fade, and it almost disappeared. We went to the park, as we promised though. I was surprised to see that all the equipment from the playground had been removed. Finally, someone had decided to renovate the park, I thought. There was a construction worker there, and I went over and asked him about what had happened. Apparently, they had started work there about 2 weeks ago, but some employees started coming down with various illnesses and injuries. He said that the construction was way off schedule and would likely take a lot longer than planned. My theory is that my friend and I were punished by some malevolent spirit for breaking the swing, and since construction started, the workers became the spirit's primary targets, and therefore our marks and bruises slowly disappeared. Hey, I know it's kind of out there, but I believe it.
This happened to me back when I was 12 years old, but I'll never forget it. When I was that age, I used to love playing outside with my friends. On the day that this happened, I was with a couple of friends. The weather was great, and we were looking for a decent place to go out and play. We were kind of bored with all of the parks in our area, so we decided to push ourselves a little more than usual and find a new park or playground to hang out in. There were 3 of us, including myself. We all had bikes. We rode for about 2 hours with no real direction in mind. We managed to get ourselves lost, and we all decided to get off our bikes to try to get our bearings back. We were in search of a park, but after a while, we gave up because we couldn't find one. We did find a vacant lot though. We decided that would have to do. We all sat down and started to play card games. There was a forest right behind the vacant lot. It was thick, with tall trees and bushes. I didn't feel like exploring, since we were already lost and a little tired from cycling. We sat there, immersed in playing our games, until our peaceful playtime was disrupted by a noise coming from the direction of the forest. I asked my friends if they were hearing what I was hearing. They agreed, and we began to listen carefully. It sounded like the noise was gradually approaching. It sounded like a bell was ringing. Now, normally the sound of a bell ringing isn't that unusual or strange, but when someone is coming towards you through a thick forest, you've got to either assume it's something bad, like a warning, or that someone's mad. My friends and I had no interest in either of those outcomes, so we started packing our things up. Just as we were getting our bikes off the ground, we heard a louder rustling sound coming from the edge of the forest. We instinctively looked towards the source of the noise, and we saw a humanoid figure stumbling out towards the vacant lot, wearing tattered and torn clothes. One glance told me that this person was filthy. Their hair was so long and dirty, I couldn't clearly see its face. Attached to the worn-out shabby clothes was numerous rusty bells. You'll no doubt have noticed that I haven't specified a gender so far. That's because a part of me believes that this humanoid thing was far from human. It was the weirdest thing. It was like it was trying to be human. Like it had misunderstood, based on experiences with humans, how to act as one. It moved at a pace between jogging and walking, with each step seemingly different from the last. The bells jangled with each movement. For the first time in my young life, I was confronted with something truly terrifying. Something so incomprehensible, it caused my whole body to freeze, like a computer does when it's overloaded. It was only when my friend screamed that my body jumped back to life, and we hurriedly got on our bikes. The human thing, with the bells attached to it, seemed to be coming directly towards us. Clearly, it wanted to make some kind of contact. It didn't say a word. All you could hear was its shambling movements, coupled with the bells. We all started pedaling like mad to get away from it. Even though we were getting further away from it, we could still hear the bells following behind us. I was too scared to look back. I didn't want to make eye contact with that thing. I am just so glad its hair was covering its eyes. I didn't want to see what kind of face it had. We had no idea where we were, so we just kept cycling until we couldn't hear the bells anymore. It was a really frightening experience, which was made worse by the feeling of being lost. Once we were certain we were far enough away from the humanoid thing, we spoke to each other about what just happened. We had all seen the same thing, and none of us had an explanation of what it was. Eventually, we were able to get home safely after reading road signs and speaking with people on the streets. This was before the time when cell phones were common. A week or two went by, and I was out again on my bike with a different friend. He asked me to go to a park with him that I hadn't been to before. I was a little nervous, but I went along. We were having a good time until I heard a familiar sound. It was the sound of rusty bells jangling, and they were getting closer. I shouted out to my friend to get onto his bike and get moving. I couldn't see that humanoid thing this time, but I suspected it was coming towards us like last time. I didn't want to hang around to find out. Naturally, the next day at school, I spoke about it with my friends from the first encounter. Over the course of the week, they said that they had heard the bells again too, also in a park. Nothing happened after that, but I half expected to hear about that thing on the news, or hear from other kids that they had seen it too. I never heard the bells again. The mystery remains. I wonder if someone put the bells around its neck so that they would know where it was at all times. I wonder if it escaped from somewhere. We do have a military base nearby. This is, however, pure speculation on my part. I hope I never encounter it again. Maybe it was recaptured. Does anyone have any idea what we experienced?
Hi guys, this is a re-recording of a really old story from I think 2019, so apologies if you've heard it before. If you have, it's probably not on the best audio quality, but anyway, here we go. There's a huge park near my house. On weekends and public holidays, it gets really busy. However, at night, the atmosphere of the park is entirely different. Back when I had just moved into the area, I was unpacking. I had so much to do and there wasn't an end in sight. so I decided to go to the park for a change of pace. The park had swings and slides, plenty of stuff. Next to a public toilet there was a phone booth illuminated in the darkness. It creeped me out a bit. Later, when I had finally finished unpacking, it was about 1 a.m. I decided to go to a convenience store. The whole time I was walking, I felt as if someone was watching me. I didn't want to look over my shoulder at any point. There was the phone booth. Ordinarily, I would walk past it without paying much attention, but for some reason I stopped and stared blankly at it. After a couple of seconds, I snapped out of it and I ran to the convenience store. I bought a few things, sweets, a bento box, and I was on my way home. Halfway through the park, I realized that I was desperate to go to the bathroom. It was unavoidable. I had to use the bathroom in the park. At that time of night, I was the only one in the park, and it was pretty creepy. As I was washing my hands, I heard a phone ringing. I checked, but it wasn't my mobile phone. It was coming from somewhere very close to the bathroom, though. The payphone was ringing. What perfect timing. I thought it must be for me. Two thoughts entered my mind. The first, curiosity. What if I answer it? The second, fear. Do not answer it. In the end, fear won. I ran back to my house while the phone rang behind me. Back home, I sat down on my sofa and I tried to organize my thoughts. I was still thinking about the phone booth. From my window, I could see the park and the phone booth. I wasn't sure if it was still ringing. I watched for a few moments. A man appeared from the nearby bathroom. The light of the bathroom illuminated him. In his right hand, he was holding a mobile phone, and in his left, something sharp like a tool or a knife. It took only a minute to run back to my house from the park. I was just there. I thought there was no one else in the toilet with me. My suspicion is that the man was waiting in one of the toilet stalls or nearby, and he dialed the payphone number, and he would creep up to whoever answered the phone from behind and murder them. What if my curiosity was greater than my fear? Whenever I think about what could have happened to me that night, I shudder. Hi everyone, thank you so much for listening, and a big thanks goes to my guest, Night Terrors. Excellent job, brilliant channel. Please do go over and check out their channel. You can find some collabs with me and all your other favourite creators, and I'm sure you'll agree there's a great narration style and voice there to be enjoyed. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.